Organize talaga yung mga disaster coordinating councils, ni-reactivate talaga. Tapos nag-isip sila ng mga policies and guidelines para makagawa ng mga precautionary measures, safety measures, hindi lamang sa kung magkakaroon ng fluvial parade. Kasi marami ng fluvial parades dito sa Bulacan.
Pagkatapos ng trahedya, naglabas na ng mga panuntunan ang lokal na pamahalaan ng Bulacan tungkol sa pagpraos ng parada at disenyo ng pagoda.
Karoon na ng sistema kung anong klaseng pagoda yung gagawin na laang. As per agreement ng Bukawi, gagawa na lang sila ng 20 feet by 20 feet na sukat noong barge kung saan ilalagay yung pinaka-karo ng crew sa Wawa. At ang maximum na laman nito o yung mga tao na sasakay dito ay 40 na lang.
Pinagbawal na rin ang pagsakay ng mga buntis at mga batang 10 taong gulang pababa.
Nagpapadala talaga kami doon ng mga rubber boats at saka mga diving equipment plus lahat ng mga rescue teams na sasama sa pagoda ay kailangan naka-undergo na sila ng water safety training.
Overloaded talaga. Dahil kahit nga doon sa bubungan, mayroon naka-ano doon. Kahit nga yung mga dadaanan, may na mga nakahiga, basta tuyo dyan, may nakahiga dyan, may nakapwesto. Yung wala lang nakapwesto, yung basa. Sus, yung usok pa lang, patay na yung tao, hindi na makahinga.
Dahil sa sobrang dami ng mga pasahero, kanya-kanyang pwesto na lang daw sa loob ng barko ang mga ito. Dagdag pa na nagpapasikip ang mga kargamento na daladala ng mga pasahero kung kaya't pahirapan ang paglakad sa loob ng barko. Isang malakas na tunog ang kanilang narinig na barabagang tunog ng malakas na kulog at may kasamang tunog ng mga bakal. Bumangga ang MT Victor sa kaliwang bahagi ng Doña Paz kung saan matatagpuan ang engine room at main switch ng barko. Total blackout ang nangyari segundo matapos mangyari ang banggaan kung kaya't pahirapan lalo ang pagdaan ng mga tao palabas ng barko. Nagsimula na rin kumalat ang apoy sa loob ng barko kung kaya't nagsitalunan na ang mga pasahero nito sa dagat kahit na wala pang mga suot na life jackets. Kalaunan ay napag-alaman na nakakandado pala sa stock room ang mga life jackets at wala ring announcement na nangyari mula sa kapitan ng barko. Ayon sa mga survivors, maraming pasahero ang bumaba palalo sa ibabang bahagi ng barko para makaiwas lamang sa makakapal na usok at apoy. Pero ang hindi nila alam na sila'y matatrap lang doon sa ilalim na bahagi ng barko. Ayon sa mga survivors na nakatalon, kumalat ang apoy sa dagat mula sa dalawang barko na nagsalpukan kung kaya't nasunog ang ilang bahagi ng kanilang mga katawan habang sila'y lumalangoy. Dinig na dinig pa nila ang mga iyakan at sigawan ng mga pasahero na natrap sa loob ng barkong Doña Paz. Pero makalipas ang ilang minuto, dahan-dahan nang nawawala ang mga boses na ito hanggang sa tuluyan na naging tahimik ang karagatan. Ang isang oras na pamamalagi ng mga survivors sa gitna ng karagatan bago sila masagip na nagdaang barkong Don Claudio ay tila bagang ilang araw na ang kanilang paghihintay. 26 ang naitalang survivors, 24 dito ang mula sa barkong Doña Paz at 2 naman ang mula sa barkong MT Victor. Wala ni isang mang crew ng Doña Paz ang nakaligtas sa trahedya. 16 na oras matapos ang insidente, tsaka na labang nakapagpadala ng search and rescue team ang Philippine Maritime Authorities at wala na silang nasagip pang buhay. Ayon sa estimated death toll, umabot sa 4,386 ang mga buhay na nasawi sa insidenteng tinaguriang the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history. Ayon sa investigasyon na isinagawa ng Philippine Coast Guard, isang apprentice crew lang ng barkong Doña Paz ang itinalagang magbantay sa bridge ng barko nang mangyaring insidente. Ang ibang opisyalis anya ay kung hindi uminom ng beer ay nanunood ng TV sa loob ng kanilang recreation quarters. Dagdag pa ng Philippine Coast Guard sa kanilang investigasyon na ang kapitan ng barkong Doña Paz ay nasa loob ng cabin nito at nanunood ng pelikula sa kanyang Betamax nang maganap ang insidente. Ang statement na ito ng Philippine Coast Guard ay sinang-ayunan naman ng survivor na si Luzgardo Niedo na nang mga gabing iyon bago pa man maganap ang insidente, siya ay sinabihan ng kanyang kasamahang pasahero na merong nagaganap na party sa bridge ng barko. May malakas na tawanan at musika at kabilang ang kapitan sa mga dumalo.
Ang pagbagsak ng eroplano sa kabundukang bahagi ng Barangay San Isidro, Isla ng Samal. Maraming teorya ang nagsasabing engine failure ang dahilan sa pagbagsak ng eroplano. Ayon kasi sa mga witness na bago pa man ito bumagsak ay sumabog na raw ito at nagpaikot-ikot ng halos 10 beses sa papawid habang pabagsak ito sa kabundukang bahagi. Mayroon ding nagsasabing talagang mababaw ang lipad ng naturang eroplano, kaya't nasagi nito ang mga niyog sa kabundukan at naging resulta sa pagkatanggal ng isang pakpak nito, kaya ito bumagsak. Ang total passenger ng flight ay umabot ng 131 katao. 124 nito ay mga pasahero at 7 nito ay ang crew members. Sa di maisip-isip ay walang ni isang pasahero at crew ang nakasurvive. Nang marating na ito ng mga rescuer ay talagang tinupok na ng apoy ang eroplano at nagkalat na ang mga debris kasama na ang mga katawan ng mga pasahero na wala ng buhay. Ang naturang trahedya ay nabansagang the deadliest air disaster sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas. Ayon sa mga naging pahayag ng Air Philippines, ito ang pinakaunang pagkakataon na may bumagsak silang aircraft. Ang Flight 541 ay on service na ng higit 8 buwan bago pa man ito na-crash. Ang naturang aircraft ay may tandang 20 years na, pero well-maintained naman ito sa ilalim ng mandato ng Air Transportation Office. Ang naturang trahedya ng Air Philippine Flight 541 ay isa na lamang di malimot-limot na kasaysayan ng Pilipinas.
Sa pagpamatay ni Magsaysay, agad na nag-aralan ng Senado noong 1957 ang mga posibleng dahilan kung bakit bumagsak ang presidential plane. Iba't ibang anggulo ang tinignan ng mga investigador sa naging dahilan ng pagbagsak ng eroplano. Unang nasiyasa sa Senate Committee meeting noong April 27, 1957 na baka ng maximum carrying capacity ang eroplano.
Pilot error ang dahilan ng pagbagsak ng 5 Seneca plane na lula noon ni DILG Secretary Jesse Robredo. Ito ang laman ng 30 pahay ng report ng Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines o CAAP sa insidente na mismong si Pangulong Noynoy Aquino ang nagsapubliko. At kumpara raw sa tamang flight path o direksyon ng mga palapag na eroplano sa Masbate, lihis din daw ang naging paglipad ng Piper Seneca. Mali rin daw na in-extend agad ang landing gear at flap ng eroplano kahit pa malayo pa sa runway. Gayon din ang pagkabig nito sa kanan na dahilan daw ng mabilis nitong pagbagsak sa dagat.
Pilot have no previous experience on flight route to Masbate.
Ang mismong pagkasira ng makina isinisi naman sa kakulangan nito ng langis. Wala raw kasing sapat na training at kakayanan ng maintenance personnel ng Aviatur. Lumabas ding dinaya raw ang test flight permit na ibinigay nitong Enero sa Piper Seneca plane na requirement para sa bagong airworthiness certificate nito matapos palitan ang right-hand engine propeller nito. Wala raw talagang ginawang test flight at nakiusap lang umano si Bahinting sa ilang kawani ng CAAP na pirmahan ang report.
Malinaw po ang ginawa nilang panlilinlang at pandaraya ang naging kabayaran buhay ng 3 tao.
Ayon naman sa Aviatur,
if ever there was a piloting technique error on the part of Captain Jessup Bahinting, as human we are, it is significantly possible. As to the issue of material failure that involved in the right engine, it is but obvious that anything that is made by man is liable to fail.
Ayon sa CAAP, isang special investigating body ang binuo para imbestigahan ang umano'y konsyamahan sa pag-i-issue ng test flight permit. Magsasagawa rin ng re-auditing ang CAAP sa mga pilot school, maintenance organization at air taxi operation.
Among the most frequently mentioned causes of the accidents, other than fortuitous events, were overloading, aging facilities, badly trained crew members, and poor compliance by the vessel and aircrafts with safety precautions and measures. Having said those, it is deemed necessary that the students be equipped with legal background about transportation, as the same is an inevitable means of effective tourism and hospitality management.
Hello everyone, we are the Group 4 and we are here to discuss the hospitality and tourism transportation. And to start with our discussion, I am Almira Lydia and I am here to discuss the definition of transportation, elements of common carrier, and characteristics of common carrier. The first thing on definition is transportation, is one whereby a certain person or association of persons obligate themselves to transport persons, things, or news from one place to another. From the word itself, transport, it means transporting or transferring someone or something to other places or place. It can be near or far. And then it is classified into two, the common carrier and the private carrier. The common carrier. There are persons, corporations, firms, associations engaged in the business of carrying or transporting passengers or goods or both by land, water, or air for compensation, offering their services to the public. It is under Article 1732, Civil Code of the Philippines. It is part of Section 4, Common Carriers, Subjection 1, under General Provisions. The common carrier or public carrier, a common carrier must further demonstrate to the regulator that it is fit, willing, and able to provide those services for which it is granted authority. The common carriers typically transport persons or goods according to defined and published routes, time schedules, and rate tables upon the approval regulators. The example of common carrier is public airlines, railroads, bus lines, taxi cabs, companies, phone companies, internet services providers, cruise ships, motor carriers or canal operating companies, or most especially trucking companies and other freight companies. It is generally operate as common carriers. Under U.S. law of ocean freight forwarder, it is cannot act as a common carrier. Private carriers are those transport or undertake to transport in a particular instance for hire or reward. Private carrier refers to a company that owns the vehicles used to transport its own goods. A private carrier does not transport goods as its primary business and thus does not seek to transport the goods of other companies like a common carrier does. In this sense, a private carrier is not a for-hire carrier and does not carry the goods of other companies at its primary business. The semi-trailer trucks are the most common method of transport associated with private carriers, though large businesses may also operate their own aircraft, rail cars, or ships as a part of their supply chain management. The composition of private carrier fleet depends on the types of goods that the company deals in and the destination that it ships to. So why mostly companies are invested in private carrier rather than paying someone or paying some companies to do transport their products? Because it is private carrier companies invest in their own transportation fleets for a variety of reasons, but some of the common reasons have to do with the cost and control. Companies may find the price of contracting or transportation that too expensive compared to the cost of owning a fleet. This is particularly true for companies with a high volume of goods shipped or companies with a less common final destination for their products. To further elaborate the distinction between common carrier and private carrier, refer to the table that we provided. So, the difference between the common carrier and the private carrier. The first thing is the common carrier holds himself out in common, that is to all persons who choose to employ him as a ready to carry for hire, while the private carrier agrees in some special cases with some private individual to carry for hire. The second difference of these two is the common carrier is bound to carry for all offers such as goods as it is accustomed to carry and tender reasonable compensation for carrying them. While the private carrier is not bound to carry for any reason unless it is enter a special agreement to do so, like what I've mentioned earlier. And the third of the difference of these two is it is the common carrier is it is for public service and subject to regulation, while the private carrier is not subject to regulations and not for public. And the last thing is the common carrier is required to render or to exercise extraordinary diligence, while the private carrier is not required to render an extraordinary diligence. Then let's move on to the elements of common carriers. The first thing is The common carrier is business transportation. Like what I've said, some businesses have no transportation system like their own truck. So the tendency of it is they will rent to others like on trucking services that are open for services. The second is for compensation or kabayaran. And the third is public services. The last thing that I'm about to discuss is all about the characteristics of common carrier. The first thing is the common carrier is regarded to some extent as a public servant since he holds himself out as a ready to engage in the transportations of goods for hire as a public employment and not as a casual occupation. He is bound to serve all who apply and is liable for his refusal without sufficient reason to do so. The second is the common carrier cannot lawfully decline to accept a particular class of goods for carrier to do prejudice of the traffic in those goods. However, the common carrier can do so where for some sufficient reasons the discrimination in such goods is reasonable and necessary under all the circumstances of the cases. And the number three is no monopoly is favored. The fact that the Public Services Commission has previously granted a license to any person to operate a bus line over a given highway and refused to grant a similar license to another person over the same highway to do not at least create a monopoly in the person of the license because of at all times. The Commission has the power to say what is reasonable rules for convenience of the traveling public and to enforce them. And lastly, it is also for the public convenience.
Degree of diligence required to a common carrier. The degree of diligence demanded upon from the common carrier is extraordinary diligence. Pero ano ba muna yung extraordinary diligence or indiligence? Diligence is careful and persistent work or effort. The nature of the business of common carriers and exigencies of public policy demand that they observe extraordinary diligence. That the business of common carrier is impressed with the special public duty is recognized in the Philippines through laws or yung mga batas, which is subject to the same control and regulation by the Public Service Commission. Bilang isang entity sa isang tourism industry, we all know that the satisfaction of the customers ang dapat primordial or basic or fundamental consideration in order to achieve success. The public must of necessity rely on the care and skill of common carriers in the vigilance over the goods and safety of the passengers. Common carriers are obliged to observe extraordinary diligence in the vigilance over the goods transported by them. Accordingly, they are presumed to have been at fault or to have acted negligently if the goods are lost, destroyed, or deteriorated. Gaya nga nung sinabi kanina, responsible sila if ever may mangyaring masama or may masira dun sa mga goods na tinatransport nila. There are very few instances when presumption of negligence does not attach, and these instances are enumerated in Article 1734. So ano ba yung nasa loob ng Article 1734? Article 1734 states that common carriers are responsible for the loss, destruction, or deterioration of the goods unless the same is lost to any of the following cause such as floods, storms, or yung mga calamities, act of public enemy in war, international man siya or civil, acts or omission of the shipper or owner of the goods, and lastly, order or act of competent public authority. Now, for a relevant case, meron ditong Eastern Shipping Lines versus IAS. The cargoes in question were, according to the witnesses for the defendant, placed in hatches number 2 and 3 of the vessel. Ano nga ba yung hatches? Ang hatches ay yung opening sa isang vessel papunta dun sa cargo hold. Boatswain Ernesto Pastrana noticed that smoke was coming out from hatches number 2 and 3, that when the smoke was noticed, the fire was already big, and that fire must have started 24 hours before the same was noticed. That carbon dioxide was ordered released, and the crew was ordered to open the hatches cover. The number 2 and 3 hold commencement of fighting by seawater, that all of these efforts were not enough to control the fire. I tried to search for this case, and they're looking into possibilities daw that it can be considered as natural disaster. If fire were to be considered a natural disaster within the meaning of Article 1734 of the Civil Code, yung sinabi kanina, It is required under Article 1739 that the natural disaster must have been the proximate and only cause of the loss, and that the carrier has exercised due diligence to prevent or minimize the loss before, during, or after the occurrence of the disaster. But the ruling is no. Fire may not be considered a natural disaster or calamity like those enumerated in Article 1734, as it arises almost invariably from some act of man or by human means. Gaya nga ng sinabi kanina, parang kakulangan kasi hindi nila chinek yung hatches while they're on, maybe before sila umalis, or during then the voyage they didn't check the hatches. It does not fall within the category of an act of God unless caused by lightning or by other natural disaster or calamity. Hindi nga siya mako-consider as natural calamity kasi hindi naman siya galing sa nature, hindi naman siya kinidlatan or ano. That's why the common carrier is generally liable for all the losses which may occur to property entrusted to his charge in the course of the business. The next one is Article 1733. Common carriers, from the nature of their business and for reasons of public policy, are bound to observe extraordinary diligence in the vigilance over the goods and for the safety of the passengers transported by them according to all the circumstances for each case. Yun nga, gaya nga nung sinabi doon sa mga nauna, ganun pa din, kailangan pa rin ng extraordinary diligence, and para na din sa kapakanan nung tinatransport nila, mapag-goods man yun or passengers or mga tao. Gaya lang din siya nung sinasabi kanina na responsible nga ang carrier doon sa passenger, kung passenger man yung itatransport nila or goods na itatransport nila. Responsible sila sa kahit anumang mangyari doon. Another one is Article 1740. If the common carrier negligently incurs in delay in transporting the goods, a natural disaster shall not free such carrier from responsibility. Ang sinasabi lang dito, kumbaga kung sa carrier na yung problema na na-delay sila, hindi na nila pwedeng idahilan yung mga natural disasters na pwedeng dumating habang nag-ship sila. If ever something happens dun sa goods na dala nila, responsible na sila dun. Kumbaga wala nang kinalaman yung natural disaster dun kasi kumbaga kasalanan na nila yun, nasa kanila na yun. The next one is Article 1741. If the shipper or owner merely contributed to the loss, destruction, or deterioration of the goods, the proximate cause thereof being the negligence of the common carrier, the latter shall be liable in damages, which however shall be equitably reduced. And now for the Article 1744, a stipulation between the common carrier and the shipper or owner limiting the liability of the former for the loss, destruction, or deterioration of the goods to a degree less than extraordinary diligence shall be valid, provided it be in writing or signed by the shipper or owner, supported by a valuable consideration other than the service rendered by the common carrier, and reasonable or just, and not contrary to the public policy. Meron ditong nabanggit na word na stipulation. Ano nga ba yung stipulation? Stipulation, it is a condition or a requirement that is specified or demanded as a part of an agreement. For this part, sabi dito parang maliles lang yung liability or yung pagiging liable ng common carrier kapag meron ditong in writing or signed by the shipper or owner, kumbaga may kasunduan sila, supported by a valuable consideration other than the service rendered by the common carrier.
Responsibilities of common carriers. We have here the Article 1755 and Article 1756 under the subsection 3, Safety for Passengers. Article 1755. A common carrier is bound to carry the passenger safely as far as human care and foresight can provide, using the utmost diligence of very cautious persons with a due regard for all the circumstances. This is a common carrier's responsibilities to carry or transport passengers and goods safely as far as they can. Bukas ang kalaman ng lahat na kahit anong mangyari, these common carriers must protect and keep them safe, with a due regards for all the circumstances tulad nga ng nilalaman ng article na ito. Next, we have the Article 1756. In case of death or injuries to passengers, common carriers are presumed to have been at fault or to have acted negligently unless they prove that they observed extraordinary diligence as prescribed in Articles 1733 and 1755. In that Article 1733, from the Section 4, Common Carriers, subsection 1, General Provisions, it says that common carriers from the nature of their business and for the reason of public policy are bound to observe extraordinary diligence in the vigilance over the goods and for the safety of the passengers transported by them, according to all the circumstances of each case. Such extraordinary diligence in the vigilance over the goods is further expressed in Articles 1734, 1735, and 1745 under the section number 5, 6, and 7, while the extraordinary diligence for the safety of the passengers is further set forth in Articles 1755 and 1756. Period wherein the extraordinary diligence should end. Article 1736 of the Civil Code of the Philippines provides the extraordinary responsibility of the common carrier lasts from the time that the goods are unconditionally placed in the possession of and received by the carrier for transportation until the same are delivered actually or constructively by the carrier to the consigned, or the person who has the right to receive them, without prejudice to the provisions of Article 1738 of the Civil Code. Next with that is the Article 1738. The extraordinary liability of the common carrier continues to be operative even during the time of goods are stored in a warehouse of carrier at the place of destination, until the consigned has been advised of the arrival of the good and has reasonable opportunity thereafter to remove them or otherwise dispose them. The Article 1736 and Article 1738 of the Civil Code of the Philippines under the subsection 2 for vigilance over goods are connected. As we can see, sa Article 1736, ang nilalaman nito ay without prejudice to the provisions of Article 1738 of the Civil Code of the Philippines, at ayon sa Article 1738 and extraordinary liability of the common carrier ay patuloy na mag-ooperate kahit pa ito ay nakatago na o naka-stored na sa warehouse, and they will have the power to dispose them or remove them kapag meron ng reasonable opportunity and if the consigned has been advised of the arrival of the goods.
For the continuation of the topic common carrier absorbed from liability, based on Article 1739, in order that the common carrier may be exempted from responsibility, the natural disaster must have been approximated only the cause of loss. However, the common carrier must exercise due diligence to prevent or minimize the loss before, during, and after the occurrence of flood, storm, or other natural disaster in order that the common carrier may be exempted from liability for the loss, destructions, and deteriorations of the goods. The same duty is incumbent upon the common carrier in case of an act of the public enemy referred to the Article 1734, number 2. As far as we know, the common carrier is responsible to carry passengers and goods safely no matter what. So for the simplest explanation about Article 1739, the common carriers can be absolved from any charges or responsibility if the cause of damages and losses are from natural disasters. As we know, natural disasters are unavoidable because the environment is our opponent or enemy, and the only thing that the common carrier can do about it is to become ready before it will happen for them to limit or minimize the loss and damages it can cause. Then when it might happen that they are in that situation already, the common carrier should know how to handle the situation, especially the right action and the response to it, because at the first place it is their duty and responsibility to become ready at all times because we cannot predict and know what will happen in a specific time. Article 1743, number 2, if through the order of public authority the goods are seized or destroyed, the common carrier is not responsible, provided said public authority had power to issue order. So, ang sinasabi rito ay if there is a case na there is an order from public authority to seize goods or might happen that there are things that will be destroyed upon it, ay walang pananagutan doon ang common carrier. Dahil the issue order from public authority ay may kapangyarihan sa kahit anong aspekto. Walang magagawa ang sino man or the common carrier itself kundi sumunod sa order na possible or probably papakita naman sa kanila. Alam naman natin na ang issue order ay bagay na dumaan muna sa masusing proseso o investigasyon bago pa nagkaroon o ma-issuehan ng ganoong order, kung kaya't hindi na kailangang mangialam ng common carrier sa ganoong bagay, even though responsibilidad pa nila ang delivery ng goods na iyon. Siguro, common carrier must assume na mayroong importante o malalim na dahilan kung bakit nila isinagawa iyon, whether siguro ay may illegalities ang mga bagay na iyon. Here are the different government agencies related to the business of common carriers. DOTC or Department of Transportations and Communications, LTFRB or Land Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board, LTO or Land Transportation Office, Philippine Coast Guard, ATO or Air Transportation Office, Marina or Maritime Industry Authority, PNR or Philippine National Railways, LRTA or Light Rail Transit Authority, MRT or Metro Rail Transit Corporation, NAIA or Ninoy Aquino International Airport, MCIA or Mactan Cebu International Airport, and PPA or the Philippine Ports Authority. DOTC or Department of Transportations and Communications or in Filipino, Kagawaran ng Transportasyon at Komunikasyon. This department is responsible for the maintenance and expansion of viable, efficient, and dependable transportation and communication systems as an effective instruments for national recovery and economic progress. Part of the department's mandate is to ensure safe and reliable services in the transport and communication needs of the citizenry. So, ang departamentong ito ay siyang may tungkulin sa pangangalaga at pangangasiwa sa sistema ng transportasyon at komunikasyon sa ating bansa. Ang mga ito din ay may layuning magkaroon tayo ng maaasahang ahensya na patuloy na magtataguyod ang pangkaunlaran ng ekonomiya ng ating bansa. LTFRB or Land and Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board or in Filipino, lupon ng pagkaprangkisa at regulasyon ng transportasyong lupa. It is responsible for promulgating, administering, enforcing, and monitoring compliance of policies, laws, and regulations of public land transportation services. They are also in charge of granting franchises or accreditations and regulating public vehicles such as public utility buses, minibuses, public utility jeepneys, utility vehicle, express services, PhilCub services, school services, taxis, transportation network vehicle services, and tourist transport services. Ang ahensyang ito ay isang sangay ng gobyerno na siyang namamarahala sa lahat ng prangkisa ng pampublikong transportasyon sa ating bansa. Sila din na nagtataguyod, nangangasiwa, nagpapatupad at sumusubaybay kung nasusunod ba ang patakaran, batas at regulasyon ng mga serbisyong kailangan sa pampublikong transportasyon sa bansa. Isang halimbawa na dito ay ang tamang halaga lamang ng pasahe na dapat lamang singilin sa mga pasahero. LTO or Land Transportation Office or in Filipino, tanggapan ng transportasyon lupa. They are responsible for all the land transportation in the Philippines. Functions of the LTO include the inspection and registration of motor vehicles, issuance of licenses and permits, enforcement of land transportation rules and regulations, and adjudication of traffic cases. Ang departamentong ito ay may responsibilidad sa lahat ng transportasyong panglupa. Tungkulin nila na pangasiwaan ang parehistruhan, pag-i-issue ng lisensya sa mga driver, pagpapatupad ng batas at regulasyong pangtransportasyon, at pati na rin ang pagsusuri at paghusga sa iba't ibang pangyayari na involve ang transportasyon. Philippine Coast Guard or in Filipino, Tanod Baybayin ng Pilipinas. It is involved in the border enforcement of maritime laws in the country, especially against smuggling, illegal fishing, and drug trafficking. It is involved in the maritime search and rescue missions as well as the protection of maritime environment. Ang ahensyang ito sa ilalim ng Pangasiwa ng Transportasyon at Komunikasyon ay itinatag para tagapagpatupad ng batas sa baybaying karagatan ng Pilipinas. Layo nito ang pagbabantay sa teritoryong pandagat ng ating bansa laban sa mga iligal na gawain. Isa pa rito, sila din ay katuwang sa pagliligtas sa mga tao sa panahon ng sakuna.
The Air Transportation Office, or in Filipino, the Tanggapan ng Transportasyong Himpapawid. Today, it is called the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, or the CAAP. It is responsible for implementing policies on civil aviation to assure safe, economic, and efficient air travel. The agency also investigates aviation accidents via Aircraft Investigation and Inquiry Board. Like what I've said again, Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines is formerly known as the Air Transportation Office. It is an independent regulatory body attached to the DOTC or the Department of Transportation and Communications for the purpose of policy coordination. Next is the Maritime Industry Authority or the Pangasiwaan ng Kalakalang Pandagat in Filipino. It is popularly known by its acronym MARINA. They are responsible for implementing development, promotions, and regulations of the maritime industry of the Philippines. Like Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines or the Air Transportation Office, it is also an agency of the Philippine government under the Department of Transportation and Communications. The Philippine National Railways, or in Filipino, the Pambansang Daang Bakal ng Pilipinas. It is a state-owned railway system in the Philippines organized under the Department of Transportation and Communications as an attached agency. It was established during Spanish colonial period, and in Spanish, Philippine National Railways is Ferrocarril Nacional de Filipinas. The modern PNR was developed only in 1984, and it currently operates around 1,060 kilometers of track on the island of Luzon, where most of the Philippine rail infrastructure is located. Take note that most of the Philippine rail infrastructure is located on the island of Luzon, and the PNR forms the backbone of the Metro Manila's regional rail services, which extend to its suburbs and to provinces also, such as Laguna. Next is the Light Rail Transit Authority. It is a public transport operator in charge for the operating and maintaining the Metro Light Rail Transit System. It was founded only on July 12, 1980. It is also responsible for monitoring the progress of construction of all LRT lines. But it is not, however, in charge for the upkeep of Manila Rail Transit System or the MRT-3. So, although it is a rail transit system, Light Rail Transit Authority is not the one who is responsible for the upkeep of the MRT-3. Those duties are relegated to the Metro Rail Transit Corporation, a private enterprise, under MRT-3's Build, Operate, Transfer Agreement. Although it has the naming format of a government agency, the LRTA is organized as a government-owned and controlled corporation under the DOTC or the Department of Transportation and Communications as an attached agency. Metro Rail Transit Corporation, like what I've said earlier, it is a private consortium or enterprise responsible for the Manila Metro Rail Transit System. It is also the original contractor of the MRT project, and it runs MRT in coordination with the Department of Transportation and Communications. The Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or in Filipino, the Paliparang Pandaigdig ng Ninoy Aquino. It is one of the two international airports serving the Metro Manila area, which is the main international gateway of the Philippines. It caters mostly to low-budget airlines servicing Manila. NAIA is managed and operated by the Manila International Airport Authority. The Mactan Cebu International Airport, or the Paliparang Pandaigdig ng Mactan Cebu in Filipino, and Tagpuhanang International ng Mactan Cebu in Cebuano. It is a major international airport in Visayas region of the Philippines, located in the Lapu-Lapu City, Mactan Island. And for your information, Metro Cebu is the country's second primary gateway. And the airport is managed by the Mactan Cebu International Airport Authority and serves as a hub for Cebu Pacific, Pan Pacific Airlines, and Royal Air Charter Service. The last government agency here is the Philippine Ports Authority or the pangasiwaang Pilipino sa mga daungan. The Philippine Ports Authority or PPA is a government-owned and controlled corporation under the Department of Transportation and Communications. So it is responsible for financing, management, and the operation of public ports throughout the Philippines except the Port of Cebu, which is under the Cebu Ports Authority. So that's all. By the way, I hope you take down important details mentioned by our group about hospitality and tourism transportation. I hope you learned something from us, and if you have any questions or clarifications, kindly ask us on our meeting. Thank you everyone. God bless and have a nice day ahead.